You have probably dealt with something like this before. And if not, well, don't worry because your time will come. And what I'm talking about is having to stand up as a leader and address something in a way that may be very intimidating to you, very daunting to you. I'm really wanting to talk about how to be a noble and bold leader. In Proverbs 28, verse 1, it says, the righteous are as bold as a lion. And what it means is that when the lion comes in contact with other beasts, and sometimes in business, maybe in ministry, I hope not, but sometimes I know in corporate America, we will come against some beast. And the lion is always confident in his mind because he knows that he can vanquish all his beasts. That's why he's king of the jungle. But the righteous, when we know that we are right about something, when we know that our view on leadership is the right way, and we need to address someone who's maybe acting like a beast, that we can be as brave as a lion. And I wanted to share with you a story from my past many years ago when I was not being noble and bold as a leader, and I got called out on it. So I was in a turnaround situation. Now, in my background, again, most of it in corporate America has been in the manufacturing sector, mostly in automotive. And I'll never forget, well, before I get into the story, I'll tell you my background is there are times that I have been in a turnaround situations, probably a lot of my backgrounds in turnarounds where I've been brought in to help turn a failing facility around. There's also lots of times in my career that I have been part of a new startup and where you get to be in on the front end of establishing all of the processes and all the ways you're going to do things that's going to form, hopefully, a good and healthy work culture for the employees. And so, there have been times I've worked for companies that had more aggressive cultures. I guess that's the nicer way of saying that when you work for companies that's kind of more aggressive, where people are not as professional and there might be a lot of, backstabbing and things that go on. And it's not fun to work in those situations. Thankfully, I've been the HR manager going into some of those situations where I can help turn that ship around. And then there have been times I've went into companies where everybody is a professional and you're not, chasing issues all the time. You're not firefighting all the time. You can actually do the bigger and better things in your function. Those are fun times. And actually, and for my career development, I like to do both. I like to go back between both because I really think it keeps me sharp and keeps me on my game of being a leader. But I went to work. I'd gotten recruited to work for this one company that was turnaround. Now, at the time, I was working for a great startup, one of the best automotive suppliers you could work for. In that time, it was a great startup. We had lots of money floating around. We could do all the great things. We had all the people resources to do all the things, and it was really good. And I got a call. I was actually traveling, and I think I was in Milwaukee, and I got this call saying, "Hey, I'd really like for you to come work in this turnaround situation." And when I heard the company's name, I was like, this is a no. This is a no. Like, I know this company by reputation. Few people have been, nobody really that I know of has been successful that's went to this company. And I was like, this is a no. And I'll never forget, I went to bed and the next day I woke up and it was plain. The Lord was saying, that is where I want you to go. It was just so obvious to me in my spirit that the Lord was saying, I know you don't want to go there, but that's where I want you to be. And so I called them up and said, okay, I'm in. And so I go in and it's a failing manufacturing facility. And I go in with the new general manager, and we turn it around. It takes, 2-3 years to do it, but we saw some great strides right from the beginning. And it went so well that that general manager got promoted into a director role. And then they sent me a new general manager. Now, here's the thing. Um, when automotive started moving south and opening up facilities, so you can see this was many, many years ago. Typically, when they brought in leadership from the north, it didn't always go well because, see, in the South, where I'm at, we are a little bit more genteel with how we talk to people, how we talk to our employees. I'm not saying we're perfect, but I'm saying it was a little bit more genteel than having someone from the north that came in, and how they would speak would be a little bit more direct and a little bit more gruff. And maybe, because maybe in the north they talk to each other more direct and plain, it's not offensive. But coming down to the south, it didn't go as well. And then I'm not making excuses, it's just difference in the way people communicate in different sections of the United States. And so a lot of times what would happen is it would be hard for northern leadership to lead a southern work group. It didn't do as well because Southerners didn't respond kindly to some of the ways that they were being spoken to. And so this company decided they were going to give up on sending people down, and they were going to hire local Southern leadership. And that's what they did. And we went in and we really turned things around. And I'm so big on having a really good culture of dignity and respect. And I'll never forget. So we went in and we began to, one of the things that we realized is that some of the mechanics, some of the basic principles of manufacturing were not being followed, especially in this one particular group that really had a big impact on our success. So we sat down with them and we kind of mapped out their role in our organization and how it properly should work, the proper flow, the proper methodologies, things they were already employing, but they didn't have them in the proper order. So what would happen when you do that typically is light bulbs will go off. And some people, even though you hope all people go, oh, that makes perfect sense. And they will start working in that new way, in the correct order. And so we did have some success there. Some people did. But then we had some people who are like, no, like I've been doing it this way for a lot of years, and I've seen a lot of new leadership come and go, and I've outlived them. I'm probably going to outlive you all. I'm going to continue to do it my way. And then what you have to do is you work with that group of people and you actually start retraining, redocumenting the process. That way you can really hold people accountable to this new process. You've documented a new work instruction, which they probably never had before. You've actually done legitimate training. So it removes any excuse that they have from doing it that way. And again, you're going to have people that will then line up because they know it's, I've got to do it this way, or I'm not, I'm going to be held accountable. And then that's going to be problematic for me to stay here in this job. Then you will have people that will just double down, and one or two things are going to happen. They're either going to start looking for another job, another place to be, or they're going to stay and continue to be insubordinate until you tell them they can't work there any longer. So I'll never forget, we had one of these coworkers in that department. She decided she found her another job and she was going to leave. Now, one of the things that I like to do when people leave my organization, if they go find another job or find a way to better themselves, I'm all for that. I hold no grudges. I think that it's a professional courtesy to host a little get together, not even maybe 30 minutes, and have some cake, punch, whatever, bring everybody in the conference room and say a proper farewell to this person. And it's a good send off. And I think it's a professional courtesy because there's no reason to take these things personally. And so when the first person decided to leave, I sent out that, we would be having, at 9 a.m., we're going to have cake and punch for so and so who's leaving us. And I remember I had so many people come to me and go, now you do know she's been a troublemaker the whole time. She's, done this and done that. And I'm like, I understand that. I understand that. But I think this is the right way to treat people. When people leave, we should send them off well. I'm going to tell you that made such an impact to people, because what it said to them is we are different than the leadership you've had in the past. We do want the best for people, whether they continue to work for us or work somewhere else for someone else. And that was probably the first major moment where people were like, okay, these people are different. Like seriously, they are different. And we had the little get together and we sent her off. And that was good. That was good. So we spent, a couple of years of really turning things around, trying to do things the proper way. And again, had great success. And we hired a lot of people that were, when we had openings, we hired people that felt like we wanted to treat people right and whatnot. So like I said, the general manager, he got rewarded by being promoted in a director role. And so this company decided, okay, we have cracked the code. We have finally made this facility successful. And so they thought, we're just going to ship down another one of our, leaders from up north, because, Detroit was taking a real hit in the automotive industry in these years. That was kind of drying up as automotive was beginning to shift south. And so they were trying to send people down that were wanting to make the move to the southern region of the United States to work in their facilities. And so they shipped another guy down. And again, you could plainly tell he was homegrown, and you could tell that he had this aggressive type of leadership style. And he had not been there very long when I got word that he had been out on the floor and he had cussed out one of our supervisors just in front of everybody. It was bad. And so I went out to that supervisor to check on him. And he was upset about what had happened, obviously. And then I began to say, well, leaders from the north, they're a little bit different than leaders from the south. They have a little bit more direct, they have a little bit more aggressive nature. They use more profanity, in business. And mid-sentence, as I am saying these things to my supervisor, he stops me and he says, Gina, I will not accept this from you. You are better than this. And as he is admonishing me, I'm thinking in my mind, you are so right. I am better than this. Like, why am I out here trying to just explain away, make excuses, and justify this act of poor leadership? Because it's a big no-no to go to anybody, no matter what job that they're doing, and publicly get onto them or to correct them or rebuke them, and definitely to cuss them out. You should always take people in a private area and have a private conversation respectfully and professionally. This did not happen. And then here I am out here trying to smooth things over for this leader who did not deserve me trying to smooth it over for him because of the way he acted. And really bold and noble leadership is to go and to address that person. You see, it's easy to go, oh, we have bold and noble leadership when the wind is at our back and we've got all the support in the world. We've got the great leaders and we're just doing our thing. It's much harder when you're like dealing with someone that's a little bit more volatile, or you're not as familiar with them. They seem a little bit more aggressive. And, I don't remember if I ever addressed it with him. I don't know if I waited till the next day and said something. Possibly, since I don't remember, I didn't do anything. I was just admonished by this supervisor and went back to my office and didn't do anything, possibly. Now, I know there's times in my leadership role as I've grown that I have addressed issues. I've addressed issues with people that were my colleagues, my peers, people that were like, if I'm in a management role and they're a supervisor, I know that I have addressed issues. And I went on to address other general managers and people in higher roles than me. But the way that I have really done it, because maybe if you're an emerging leader, you may be wondering, what would that even look like? What would it look like to address someone, that's a leader that has done this? And for me, as being the human resources manager and someone who cares so much about the culture, I really needed to be the one who said something to this general manager. And so there will be times when you're not the person that should say something, but there are going to be times as a leader when you are the person and you're going to know this is your responsibility. But what would it look like? What would it look like? And I'll never forget many years ago when I was a receptionist, and there was a girl that was my HR manager. She was really an office manager at the time, because they weren't calling her a human resources manager. She was an office manager. But eventually they changed her title, and that's just spending more and more time with her. She's really the reason I decided I want to do human resources. This is a role I think I would really like, because I just admired how she handled herself. Now, she was as young as I was, but she was like so wise. And I'll never forget, at the time, we had an operations supervisor who could be really difficult, and he could kind of be smart alecky and how he responded to people. And I remember we were all in this large office one day and he's just ranting and raving and he's really upset about something. And she walks over to him and she says something very quietly to him, but it immediately changed his demeanor and changed his approach. Like it de-escalated his whole demeanor. And I don't know, maybe she walked over there and said, if you don't stop acting like this, you're going to get fired. But no, I don't think she said that. I think she really went over and she said something very reasonable to him that helped him to reframe his thoughts and to respond differently. And I've always remembered that moment. I don't even know why I didn't ask her, like, what did you say? But I just remembered knowing that she had said something wise, something noble and righteous to him, and it helped him get a grip. It helped him to completely change his thought process on this topic. And I'm thinking, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. And so I do know that how I have addressed people that, again, is either my peer, maybe they're a subordinate to me, maybe in a higher, position to me, and even a couple of levels higher than me as I got into an executive role, is to really reason with that person, to really ask them, how I could have went to that general manager, thinking back, would maybe the next day to give him time to kind of calm down, is to say, hey, I heard about this incident where you got onto the supervisor, tell me what happened, and let him explain himself, explain his story, why he was so upset, let him get out his side of the story, but then begin to talk to him about, we really want to be careful with how we deal with people. And this is why we want to, we've done a lot of work to make sure people understand that we want to treat people with dignity and respect. And I know you want to be treated with dignity and respect. And that takes us treating people, even our subordinates, with dignity and respect, and talked to him about different ways we could have done things and preferred ways to do things as a leader in business. I could have had that conversation with him because here's the deal and why it matters to your culture is that his employees, their first thought when they saw him being just chewed out, this supervisor there's being chewed out in front of everybody, their first thought was not, oh, poor supervisor. No, their first thought was, oh, this could happen to me. It's like if someone gets wrongly discharged from their job, people don't think, oh, poor coworker who got wrongly fired. Their first thought is, oh, that could happen to me. And that's why we have to be very careful with how we treat people in our workforce because it has an impact one way or the other on our culture. And so that's why it takes for us to be, righteous and how that righteous and noble leadership is so important because again, we're trying to have a really good culture where we work at. And that can be, again, in ministry or in the marketplace. You can have a ministry, a women's ministry, where if you're not able to exhibit noble and righteous boldness and address, people that might inadvertently be causing issues, um, then you're going to end up with this culture that's not going to be conducive to what you're trying to accomplish. I'll never forget in the 90s, there was this movie. It's based on a Jane Austen book, and it's called Emma. Now I know I'm really dating myself, but I've already told you a lot of things that happened to me many, many years ago. And so you already know I'm a little bit uh, mature. We'll say it that way. But I'll never forget watching this movie, Emma. Now, most of this movie, Emma, it's based in the Edwardian period, and she and there's Emma, and she's played by Gwyneth Paltrow, and then there's Mr. Knightley, and for the majority of this movie, Emma and Mr. Knightley, they're just buddies. Her sister is married to his brother. So for the most of it, even though they end up falling in love and getting married at the end, they're just buddies who hang out a lot. And there was in their friend group this little bit older woman who was an old maid, and she was a little bit poorer than they were in this friend group. And she had some very definite idiosyncrasies that they would tolerate. And they were at a picnic one day, and Emma kind of acts a little ugly to this woman. She kind of is disrespectful to her, and it embarrasses her. And so a little bit later, as Emma is leaving the picnic, Mr. Knightley catches up with her and he admonishes her. And he's telling her, that her actions might guide the actions of others because she was influential. And this is an influence episode in the podcast. And so we want to be careful about how we use our influence, and we want it to be noble and righteous. So this was a moment when Emma had not done the noble and righteous thing. She'd actually succumbed to being a little bit ugly to this woman. And so Mr. Knightley is saying, others might be guided by your actions. And he's like, he's letting her know you are better than this. And I'll never forget one of the sentences that he says is, I hope as a dear friend, you understand that I'm giving you good and faithful counsel. He says something very similar to that. And I loved that statement. And often I will use that if I've had to say something hard to someone else. And I've had to do this with women at church, being a director of women's ministry. I've had to meet with women, or women come to me and I have to say some hard things to them. And then I've had to do it as a professional person. And then people's had to say it to me. Just the other day, my husband did this to me. But I love, I have to say, I just want you to understand as your friend or as your colleague, I want to give you good and faithful counsel. And I remember when I watched this movie, I was freshly divorced and I was like crying, going, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had a Mr. Knightley, someone who cared about my character so much that they would admonish me." Well, I've married that man. And just the other day, I had one of my daughters who was feeling overwhelmed and she was feeling, just overwhelmed, and she really needed her sister to step in and help her for a period of time. The problem with that was that her sister had already made another serious commitment. And but I'm listening to this one daughter who's really just overwhelmed, and in my effort to try to help her because I couldn't, I call my other daughter to try to see, can she rearrange her commit, can she do something different? Now, my husband has caught wind of this, and as I'm getting on the phone with this other daughter, my younger daughter, my husband is like, "You are not calling her to get her to change her commitment, are you? Because that's not who you are." And I was like, "Okay, here's my Mr. Knightley." And it was funny because I immediately changed the tone where I was. I was going to go down this questioning road of, and then try to see if I could change things around so she could help her sister. And instead, because I was admonished, and I remember, you are better than this. You are better than this. I cannot be the one talking my daughter, my younger daughter, out of not following through with commitment. Like, what kind of person am I? And so it turned into this conversation with that daughter about, we need to follow through with our commitments. In a world where so many people don't, let's be one of those kind of people. Those are the kind of people we are. And then I'd call my other daughter back and go, "I know you're in a difficult season right now, but it is a short season and you can do this because you can do hard things." That's the kind of people we are. So it was so funny how he admonished me, and it turned out into this great coaching session with both of my daughters to do the right thing and to encourage them. Again, that's how righteous and noble leadership happens. And so we got to have people like that. We have to have people like that in our lives. And then there are times when we've got to be that person. That's how you become a person of influence.